Hello, and welcome to James and the Frames. It's been a little over a year since the last episode of the Skywalker saga released in theaters, and I think now is as good of a time as any to talk about the new direction Lucasfilm is going with Star Wars content, and how it's really a genius move on their part. This video is completely discussion orientated, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this subject down in the comments. I got some great feedback and very kind words from all of you on my video, The Haunting Details of the Prequels, so I decided to make another video in the same style, but talking about a more practical topic. The topic in question is the bright future that Lucasfilm has going forward, and how the use of Disney Plus to tell Star Wars stories is the perfect move going forward in many aspects. Star Wars content on Disney Plus has had an amazing start. The Mandalorian now has 2 seasons under its belt, both universally praised by fans and critics alike, and it was the most watched show in the world on multiple occasions. Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 7 aired close to a year ago, bringing a conclusion to the incredible animated series. Star Wars is making a huge comeback, and I'll tell you why. Let's start off with a little backstory. If you didn't already know, Star Wars was originally inspired by old Flash Gordon adventure serials.
I would say probably the original impetus for the whole thing was I used to watch a serial on television called Adventure Theater, and they had Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe on it, and I used to love that. So I went off and wrote my own space opera.
Weekly episodes where one day you had a cliffhanger and had to wait until next week to see what would happen, or a new storyline would pop up with a new villain and characters and so on. Sounds familiar enough, right? Well, Star Wars translated that format into feature films. The escapism of another world that you could tune into on a Saturday morning turned into major cinematic events that were attended by millions upon millions of people. However, with this change, instead of waiting for a week, you would have to wait 3 years back then. That was perfectly fine for what the technological limitations were back in the 70s and 80s, but I can only imagine the agonizing wait between Empire and Return of the Jedi. But it's not just Star Wars I want to talk about. Another Lucasfilm movie series, Indiana Jones, was also inspired by the, you guessed it,
adventure stories that were mainly represented by these very cheaply made, low-budget black and white Republic serials.
Old 1930s adventure serials. Again, breathing more life into the escapism, entertainment, and adventure that those serials were known so well for, transforming those couch surfing specials into incredible larger-than-life blockbusters. With that being said, almost every movie that Lucasfilm has made for the past 40 years was inspired in some way, shape, or form by those classic TV serials, turning them into big screen experiences. But now, it's a perfect time to take a break from feature films. With the age of video on demand and streaming, TV has never been more popular. Millions of people around the world watch and rewatch original shows on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and now Disney Plus. Streaming services are also becoming the next movie theaters, only instead of movies, there's going to be a lot more TV shows. I genuinely think that bringing back those adventure serial type stories for a new generation through that streaming formats will work extremely well. Look at, for example, the recent season of The Mandalorian. Every single Star Wars fan really enjoyed it, as far as I'm concerned. I remember reading reviews and watching people's reactions saying that they couldn't wait for next week's episode. And I know that's the case for some TV shows that get weekly releases, but with the age of binge watching and entire seasons coming out on single release dates, these reactions are genuine, passionate. Now, where have we heard about these feelings before? Who else, way back in the 1950s, shared that feeling with us? George Lucas himself. Those feelings of thrilling adventure and excitement are being reborn into shows such as The Mandalorian. It's basically an old-school spaghetti western TV serial set in the Star Wars universe. If Lucasfilm decides that this is the way, no pun intended, to continue telling the majority of their stories, I think it would be the most brilliant way to revive classics like Indiana Jones and of course boost the popularity of Star Wars even more. Lucasfilm using this format going forward is the equivalent of them fulfilling their storytelling destiny. Stories that once worked incredibly well in feature films will undoubtedly work even better in a weekly episode format. I think it's great that they're concentrating more on these types of stories, and shifting their focus away from feature films just for a little bit. I know that I've been repeating myself again and again, but those weekly formats are the medium in which stories like Star Wars and Indiana Jones were always meant to be told. Imagine an Indiana Jones TV series. A new adventure every week, having a non-linear storyline even, like the Indiana Jones films have done. More adventures, more action, and more indie. And with Star Wars, well, let me just say that if there's one thing Star Wars fans haven't fought about as much in the past decade, it's the TV shows that have come out. The Clone Wars movie wasn't really well received at first, but it laid the groundwork for one of the greatest animated television shows ever made. The Clone Wars is now loved by millions of fans worldwide. Rebels is another example. It wasn't as popular as the Clone Wars when it first started out, but now I believe it's reached a similar status. And now The Mandalorian has done so well to the point where the Star Wars community has been repaired after the massive division that the sequel trilogy caused. Sadly, a lot of Star Wars fans are split on the sequel trilogy, but when it comes to the TV shows, a lot of fans prefer them over the former. I myself like the sequels, and I actually believe that the new shows coming out before the events of the sequel trilogy will improve the movies in the same way that the Clone Wars show improved upon the prequels. But that's a discussion for another day. Lucasfilm is making a brilliant move by sticking to making Star Wars and possible other Lucasfilm properties into TV shows, while at the same time going back to the roots of their own stories, and I'm super happy about it. Don't get me wrong, I love Star Wars movies as much as the next guy, but I'm also interested to see how this new direction will play out. Once again, if any of you have thoughts on this subject, feel free to comment down below, because I'd love to hear what you guys think. Also, for the time being, I'd like to start easing away from Star Wars, just for a little bit. Doesn't mean I'll stop talking about it, of course, but I have some other videos planned that I'm super excited to share with you guys, so stay tuned. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you after the credits.